This is our last concluding panel, and the speech is going to be delivered now by John Savageau, who is the CEO of Pacific Tier Communications.
A lot of the things I'm going to talk about today are based on my experience working both with the internet business, the facility-based carrier business, including terrestrial and submarine cable operators, telecom companies, and emerging internet-based content delivery networks and content companies. We've all talked about backbones. Constantly, every other presentation has gone into a backbone discussion. I did like the minister's comments the first day that backbone communications should be considered the fourth utility. I completely agree with that and completely support that. Much like a highway system, perhaps the day that you build a 6-lane highway, you're not going to use 6 lanes worth of highway, but as societies and economies develop, eventually that 6-lane highway is worth a whole lot. And I believe that when we start looking at building national backbone infrastructure, coming from the landing stations or at border crossings, connecting towers, connecting cities, connecting carrier hotels and data centers together, that backbone is the highway that's going to bring this whole conversation together. And one thing that we used to talk about in a previous job that I had at Level 3 Communications is our job at that time was to build big, fat, dumb pipes. We were building basic infrastructure. We were a carrier's carrier, and that capacity that we put in the ground would become available for other companies, value-added service providers, and people who would further exploit that infrastructure. Over the past couple of days, I've also had an opportunity to get out of the resort complex here and be able to travel around the surrounding area, Kampala and around this area. And I can say that as much as we want to talk about delivering copper to the home or fiber optics to the home, homes around this area are not going to see that anytime in the near future. Particularly in the case of Uganda, when I was listening to the presentation saying that Uganda throughout the country has 100% tower access or wireless access to the country, there may not be a choice in the near term other than to use wireless, and wireless can be exploited, and if those towers are considered part of the fourth utility, it's a resource that should not be ignored. The other thing that I want to talk about briefly is the idea of everything over IP. Being in the One Wilshire building and having somewhere around 360 carriers and network providers in a single facility, I also had access to a lot of things like Nortel switches, gateway switches, DMS 250s, 300s. When I arrived at that building in 2003, there was probably 45 circuit switches, Class 4 and Class 5 switches within the building. When I left a couple of months ago, there were 0 circuit switches in the building, and every carrier operating out of that facility was using something like a Sonos box or something that was running VoIP, and they were only turning it into telephony where they had to. And all of the international telephony and communications was done over IP, 100% of it. So as we start looking at how we're delivering communications, everything over IP should be a consideration. And when you're in a country that has 100% wireless access to every part of the country, looking at new technologies like LTE, when I've heard some people say LTE is a pipe dream, other people have said we have to look at the next generation, and 2 generations on, having those towers in place today and having them interconnected with a high-performance backbone or temporarily with, say, microwave communications, we can support broadband delivery to every last square centimeter of a country like Uganda and have it be at a performance level that's equal to anything that I might see in my own home of Honolulu. And the other thing that I want to keep in mind here is that we talk about LTE and protocols like that with handsets. There's nothing that says that delivering that type of technology has to go to a handset. It supports desktop sets, local Wi-Fi access. It supports a lot of things that don't necessarily have to fit into a PDA. And the other thing, much like that 6-lane highway, one danger that we want to avoid, particularly given the statistics that were given to us by many presentations, including the World Bank presentations, 400% growth per year, lots of numbers like that. We don't want to build an infrastructure that is limited to the point where it may meet our needs today, may meet our needs from 24 months, but 24 months from now, we hit a capacity wall and we have to start all over again. So I don't personally believe there's any problem with thinking big. In fact, I believe that as we're considering infrastructure for the short term and the long term, thinking really, really big is pretty important. Well, I don't want to use a lot of examples of projects outside of Africa. I will use one example in Los Angeles. Prior to a political convention that we had in the year 2000, the city of Los Angeles notified all the telecom companies that we were going to give you a 6-month window where we'll open the streets in the city of Los Angeles. Any telecom company, power utility, or anybody else that needs access to the streets, during that period, put as much infrastructure as you can afford into the ground. Some companies, like a company called Wilshire Connection, put over 50 conduits under the ground, connecting nearly every building in the downtown area of Los Angeles. That capacity, once they blacktopped over the street and said, we're not allowing you to open the streets for the next 10 years, that capacity is now still feeding the internet boom and the explosive growth and capacity that we've had over the years.